So, thanks very much for joining me for the second installment of Stumbling to Success Lessons Learned in Communicating Data for Impact. The first installment was basically just an introduction, a way to set the stage and say, are we actually achieving impact with data? We're afloat in so much data, but are we really seeing results from our use of these data, especially in the social sector? That was the first one, just sort of raising that as a question. This second one begins to explore what can we actually do to be better communicators with data. Um, and so we're going to be looking this time around in particular at finding data, just some lessons that I've learned about that, and building visualizations. These lessons are not meant to be expansive on this particular topic, especially building visualizations. There's a whole craft to do for that. I will provide some resources. These are just some ideas to get you started and thinking about this. There will be, over the course of these trainings, probably 7 or 8 different installments. So we're just introducing this particular concept. All right, so let's dive in. Some people may know who these musicians are, Crosby, Stills, Nash. And some people may wonder, what could they possibly have anything to do with data or data storytelling? Some people may be familiar with the concept of if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with, a famous song, as you may know by these three. But in this case, we are going to slightly tailor that. And the way I want you to think about this is, if you can't be with the data you love the data you're with. This idea I can't take credit for. There's someone that I had worked with a long time ago at the California Health Interview Survey. And she's the one who mentioned this idea to me. And I thought it just summarized this perfectly. In essence, we sometimes are at a place where we figure, you know what, I'm not going to even bother to communicate these data. And that's because I don't have the exact data that I need. I need a certain racial and ethnic breakdown. I need the data granular down to a zip code level, whatever it may be. And because I don't have that, I'm sorry, I don't feel like I can go out there with the communication. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't wait for that perfect data set to appear, because in many cases, even though we're getting so much better with releasing data, we actually may not find that perfect data set. I would release what you can release. It can be a nice proxy for what you have. And so I think it's really important for us to keep this in mind. This is on that topic, the first one that I mentioned, of finding data. You may not find the data that you exactly need, but if you can find something that's close, I would communicate with that. So let's dive from there into, now that you have your data, into building visualizations. This is one of the many steps that we'll be learning about when it comes to communicating effectively with data. And here, the second lesson is about the type of chart that you choose and how it can really matter greatly. I'm purposely choosing a chart that gets picked on a lot, the pie chart. And for this one, when I'm giving this as a presentation with an audience, I often will ask, what's the biggest slice of this pie? And people will look at this and they may know the answer. They kind of know the answer. It looks a little bit like yellow, maybe green is the biggest slice. But the point is, they're not positive. Now take a look at these exact same data as a bar graph, and you will see where why pie charts sometimes are good and sometimes are bad. The fact of the matter is that we have a hard time processing information as slices of pie. It's a cognitive sort of issue that we're facing there. And when you look at it as a bar graph, why, we're much better at that. And that's the point here. It's not necessarily to say that pie graphs are always bad. I think pie graphs have a valuable function, especially when you don't have many slices, and especially when those slices are not basically equivalent. So pie graphs definitely have a place, I think. But the larger and broader point I'm trying to make here is that it's really important to think carefully about the type of chart you choose. I list here, and if you reach out to me after you watch the presentation, I will send this to you. I reach out, I list here some resources that I think can be helpful to you. I just wanted to go through them quickly. There are so many different types of data visualization styles out there and chart types that you can choose. um, I don't want you to think that you have to know them all. One of the resources that I link off to is a list of the various different types of charts, and if you click on any particular one of these, you will get some really interesting information that explains what that chart is, how it looks, a description of it, etc. So this is a really useful resource. Another resource that I link off to is tables. I think a lot of people, there's often an academic conversation that happens. Are tables data visualizations? I tend to actually think they are. And I think they can be a very clean, a very effective way of summarizing the information. So I also wanted to provide this, what to consider when creating tables. By the way, you'll notice that a lot of the resources that I'm linking off to here are from Data Wrapper, a very nice data visualization tool. They do provide some really useful education on these topics, including on this topic of when should you use a pie chart. We were talking about that earlier, and so here's some information directly on that. Um, and then I think it's really important for data visualization to focus very much on color. The color palette you choose can really make a big difference in terms of whether that visualization is compelling, whether it's effective. This is an article that talks in particular about how actually sometimes the most important color that you can have in a visualization is gray, because you sometimes want to submerge some information so that you can highlight in a color other than gray other information. So this is an interesting read, and actually on that very topic of data visualization and color is something that was just posted earlier today from the Data Visualization Society's publication, Nightingale, on how to choose colors for your data visualizations. So this is all part of that second lesson that we've been going through, which is how the type of chart you choose and how that can matter greatly. And as you'll see, these are the 4 resources that I link off to. So lesson number 3, again on that topic of crafting a visualization, of creating it, is how important it can be to simplify, and then, yes, simplify that chart some more. Remove some grid lines if you can. Make sure you don't have too much information that can get in the way of explaining what that chart is doing. A couple weeks ago, I came across this chart, and I just thought it was such a succinct way of expressing this concept, this lesson of removing information when you can. Now, in this case, as it turns out, this chart actually has no words on it whatsoever. But if you take a look at it, you can kind of understand what's going on here. This is talking about readership of newspapers by age versus readership of people using their phone by age. And the chart is just done so effectively. I don't necessarily mean to suggest that you need to go to this length in terms of simplifying, but I wanted to show you this as an example to say, look, you actually can go to this length and it still works. So the point here, though, is take a look at your chart, build it out initially, and then take a look and say, okay, what can I remove? What information here is really not essential? Now, you may not have the best grasp of the answer to that question, which is why I think it can be valuable to share this with your colleagues. They may have some good insights too. So that's the 3rd lesson that we've talked about today. The 4th lesson that I want you to think about is something that's become, I guess, in vogue these days with data visualization is rather than thinking about chart titles, rate of this or that by race and ethnicity, think about them as headlines. In essence, think about a chart description or headline, if you want to think of it that way, that not only sort of gives a title for the chart, but actually describes what the chart is showing. In this case, that residents of West Sacramento, and I'm coloring the text so that I don't need to have a separate sort of legend here or key. which again is for reasons of simplifying the chart. But residents of West Sacramento are more likely to go to the emergency department or be admitted to the hospital for high blood pressure compared to the county or the state as a whole. This is just one example of how you can use headlines to describe your chart rather than simple chart titles. It's yet another lesson that I think I've found has been very effective. It's a way to guide the reader and to help them understand the information. This is the end of the second installment. As I mentioned before, there are links in these slides. If you want these slides or have questions or comments, you are welcome to reach out to me. I'd be happy to share these slides with you. We're going to go on next time, and we're going to talk about data storytelling. We're going to start to get into some of the interesting tactics associated with data storytelling, and we'll do that next week. For now, thanks very much, and again, reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.